a kind of silly one called Yucky Worms. It's by Vivian French and illustrated by Jessica Alberg. This reminded me of Earth Month, since April is Earth Month. Yucky worms. One day, when I was in Grandma's garden, Grandma dug up a slimy, slithery, wiggly worm. There she is handing it to him. Oh! Yuck, I said. Throw it away. Throw it away? Grandma looked horrified. Would you throw away one of your friends? You can't be friends with a worm, I said. You can't even tell which end is which. Yes, you can. Watch. Grandma put the worm down. It gave a kind of squirmy wriggle and it disappeared really fast, pointy end first. As the rounded end vanished, Grandma said, "There goes its tail." I bent down to look and I could see that it had left a little tunnel. "Where did it go?" I asked. "Home," said Grandma. "It's an earthworm. It lives underground." So here are all the parts of the worm and they're labeled for us, which is really great. Here's its brain. This is my mouth where food goes in. Esophagus. You have an esophagus too, it's right here. You can touch it, it's your throat. Where the food goes next. The crop, where the worm stores its food, which I think is kind of like a stomach. The gizzard, where the food is ground down. I think that works kind of like our intestines. Oh, wait, it says intestines, where goodness from the food is absorbed into the bloodstream. And this is my bum, where the poop comes out. This is its skin, covered in mucus for easier wriggling, and mucus is what makes it slimy. This is the clitellum, a pale ring found only on adult worms. And worms have 5 pairs of hearts. I did not know that. That's a new one. But what does it eat? Dirt? I wanted to know. It eats tiny, tiny stones and bits of dirt, Grandma told me. But worms eat other things too, like rotting leaves and flowers and fruit and dead insects, and they especially like eating at night when it's cool out. The stones and the dirt help to grind everything up in the worm's stomach, and then the worm poops it back out. Worms come above the ground to find things to eat too, and they pull their food back down as they wriggle into the ground again. Grandma pointed at the flower bed. Look, can you see? This part's kind of gross, get ready. I bent down and I saw what looked like a weird long curly worm made out of dirt. That is worm poop, my grandma said. It's called a cast. You know when you recycle things? Well, worms do it too. There's still a lot of goodness left in the things a worm eats, and when the goodness comes out again as poop, it helps plants to grow big and strong. And as the worms move around under and on top of the soil, the poop gets spread around the garden. It's kind of like compost. There, can you see what he's pointing to? That's why worms are my friends. Grandma gave me a thumbs up. And it's not just their poop that's good for plants. The tunnels that they dig loosen the soil so roots can stretch out and air and rainwater can get in. So as they create these tunnels, when they dig, the rain can come down and it has a place to go. It doesn't get stuck on top of the soil. But it's dangerous being a worm, Grandma said. I stared at her. Dangerous? I asked. She smiled at me. Lots and lots of animals think worms make the most delicious dinner. Shopping list for this. I think this is a mole. Worm, 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 worm. Quite the shopping list. Birds love them, and so do moles, badgers, frogs, hedgehogs, and foxes, and even some slugs can eat worms. And human beings accidentally slice through them with spades and spike them with forks. It's a tough life. There's someone gardening that accidentally got a worm. Cutting them in half doesn't hurt them, Grandma, I said. They just turn into 2 worms and they keep on growing. Grandma shook her head. Poor worms. Lots of people think that, but it's not true. She put her fork down. Time for a snack. Grandma had tea and I had orange juice. Can I dig up a worm? I asked. If it rains, Grandma said, the worms will come up on their own. So think about that. If the water comes down and it fills up all their tunnels, where are they gonna go? They breathe air too, just like us, so they gotta come to the top. Worms breathe through their skins. They don't mind the soil around them being wet, but if their tunnels are flooded, they come up to the surface to move around more easily. I took a cookie. What if it doesn't rain though? Grandma winked at me. We'll use the watering can and pretend. I finished my cookie as fast as I could. Can we trick the worms now? Let's see. Grandma filled the watering can and I watered the ground. Then I stood back. I didn't want worms chewing at my shoes. I wonder if that would happen, if they would really do that. They only put their heads out, Grandma promised. And it'll be a while before they do. So he's here watering this whole garden patch, hoping that the worms will come out. Here's some worm facts. When it's very hot and the soil gets too dry to slither through, a worm will wriggle down to where the soil is still damp, curl up, and wait for it to rain. When it's very cold, a worm will wriggle down even deeper below the frost level. So in places where it snows, the ground can freeze. And it'll curl up with the other worms for warmth. Keep each other warm. Grandma was right. I had time to eat 2 more cookies before she said, "Look!" "Wow," I said. I could just see the tip of a worm above the ground. "Now, watch this." Grandma stomped her foot and the worm disappeared. There's the little worm right there. "Did it see you?" I asked. Grandma shook her head. Worms don't have eyes. They feel vibrations, which is when something wiggles back and forth. And a thump like that might mean that a hungry bird is landing. Danger. Grandma dug her fork into the ground. Up came lots of dirt and lots of wriggly worms. She picked one up and washed it in the watering can. "Mustn't drop it," she said. "They can't swim." She can't get it stuck in the watering can. Grandma put the clean worm on some paper and held it near my ear. I could hear a tiny rustling noise. What's that? They're covered in little tiny bristles. Grandma said the bristles and their muscles help them move. So bristles are like, think of a hairbrush. It's got the pokey parts. They have little pokey parts too. A worm, it has ridged muscles all along its body. And to move, it pushes its front end forward and uses its bristles to hold that end in place while the back catches up. The bristles on the back end keep the worm from sliding backwards, while the front end tunnels forward again into the earth. So these are the little tiny bristles if you look at it through a magnifying glass. I had never known that worms have bristles. I've got muscles too, and I bent my arm so Grandma could see them. If you've got so many muscles, she said, maybe you'd like to help me plant my sunflower seedlings. Okay, I agreed, and then I thought of something. When I go to school on Monday, I'm going to say that I've got lots of new friends. Good idea, Grandma said. But I said, I might not actually say that they're worms. I wonder why he doesn't want to tell his friends that he has worms for a friend. Here's how to be a wormologist. And an ologist means a scientist. So here's a worm scientist, the things that you can do. You can look for worm casts in your garden or in the park. You can look for leaves sticking up out of the ground, because that might mean that the worms are pulling them under to try to eat them. Or you can look for worms on the surface of the soil after it rains. You can experiment by watering a dry patch of grass or dirt and watching to see if they come up, tapping on the ground to see if you can make a worm believe that it's raining, or carefully digging up a forkful of dirt and counting how many worms you find. A worm in the hand. When you pick up a worm, remember to be respectful. A worm is a living creature. Check how it feels when you touch it. Is it smooth? Is it slimy? Can you feel the bristles? Watch how it moves. Is it a youngster or an adult? Adults have that band around the middle, remember? A yellow ring around their body. Then put the worm back on a newly dug soil. So don't put it on the hard dirt that's really dry. Put it back on something that you've dug up and watch how it wriggles away. Always wash your hands after touching worms. And that is the end of yucky worms. I hope you like